If you accept the handle of African American, that says that you don't accept being an American American. You don't accept being born in Chicago or New York or Detroit or wherever you were born. For generations, your family has been here.
Why do African Americans generally don't like Africans? It's a question. It's King Nido, representing here at the Men at Work YouTube channel. And don't forget to subscribe and comment. Greetings from all kings and queens. African Americans, for various reasons, sought to colonize, conquer, liberate Africa from European clutches and create a safe space for African and African descendant peoples to thrive. Let's start with this beautiful woman.
Africa is a continent with 54 countries and over 1.2 billion people. A statement such as Africans don't like African Americans is a very ludicrous statement because one, is perpetuating this narrative that there is beef and animosity between Africans and African Americans. And two, what that is doing is it's generalizing an entire continent based off of the actions of a couple of African hairdressers who live in America. And this is coming from someone who has traveled to 4 out of 54 of the African countries. Okay, so I went to Tanzania and I was treated like royalty. People were bowing at my feet. I felt like I was some type of long lost queen who had finally returned to the land. Let's talk about Ghana. Ghana was one of the most beautiful countries that I ever visited. I had a family who opened up their home to me. They were feeding me 3 times a day. We were living by the beach. They were doing so much to just make me feel welcomed and loved. So this is for all of my African American people. Go to Africa. Go to the different countries that are there. Learn some of the languages, learn some of the cultures there, because this is the thing. There are more similarities than differences between Africans and African Americans. And we need to kill this narrative. We need to break the plane and start the conversation so that we can get to know each other and enjoy the beautiful continent that we call the motherland, Africa, Azania. Okay? Peace and blessings, y'all.
How Black America fell out of love with Africa.
It's a broken culture, it's a broken society, and hip-hop is hurting things. But I also want to talk to you about something I've realized. Even if Black Americans are aware and know their history, right? And you can get Black conservatives who understand the history much more, who understand, the ills of the left and what the left has done. But still in that regard, they bring to the conservative side the same bad habits that I was hoping Black conservatives would be abandoning. And what I'm talking about, number one, is conflict resolution. Black Americans do not know how to resolve basic conflicts. Everything has to turn into a fight. I hate you forever. You got to draw lines. It's like you're this gang or that gang. And you still see it happening in politics.
No doubt, the above represents a very abstract relationship with Africans in America. It is not that deep and barely even real. But I suspect it resembles the kind of relationship that many traditional African Americans have with recent immigrants from Africa. Pan-Africanism sees the suffering of Black people throughout the world, whether from colonialism, slavery, or segregation, as interrelated. No less a figure than Martin Luther King Jr. understood these struggles to be connected. In Ghana, for the celebration of its independence from Britain, Dr. King said, "This event, the birth of this new nation, will give impetus to oppressed peoples all over the world. I think it will have worldwide implications and repercussions, not only for Asia and Africa, but also for America."
What do you consider yourself today? Are you American? Are you African? Are you African American? What are you?
I'm an African raised in America. Clearly.
So you're not American?
I wish I was, but my mind is not American. It's clearly African.
But you have the accents. You have,
I went to school in America.
Uh-huh.
My whole earlier childhood, I was raised in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Then I came to America. Every summer, we would go back to Africa for a vacation. And then when I graduated high school, it was a choice whether we wanted to go to Africa or stay in the U.S. And just the opportunities in the U.S. was so much greater than Africa.
Well, you're certainly the perfect example of the American dream coming true. And what would be your advice to a young African who's immigrating to the United States today?
Ultimately, you can't change who you are. And I think the biggest obstacle is that when people come to the U.S., they kind of alienate their original and they conform to what's there.
For decades, through the final overthrow of apartheid in South Africa in the 1990s, movements for the rights of Black Africans on both sides of the Atlantic propelled and reinforced one another. In the West African kingdom of Dahomey, before the kingdom's captives departed for the New World to be enslaved, they were forced to march around the Tree of Forgetfulness 6 times, so that they would remember neither their home continent nor the people they were leaving behind. The Dahomey aristocrats forced captives to sever ties with their homeland.
Black people have lost their identity, but our oppressors have not lost our identity. That's just why they chopped those noses off of the Pharaoh and the Sphinx in Egypt in the first place, is because without this nose, we can tell you this is whoever it is.
In the same vein, contemporary Afro-pessimist intellectuals argue that the Middle Passage means today's Africans and members of the African diaspora have forgotten one another. Afro-pessimism is a theory developed by Black American intellectuals like Frank Wilderson, Christina Sharp, Saidiya Hartman, and Fred Moten, which holds that the experience of racism and slavery in the Americas makes the Black American experience so unique that it cannot be compared with the suffering of other peoples.
So I am first generation. Both of my parents are from Liberia. I was born and raised in the United States. So I got to witness firsthand both sides of this argument. So the thinking in a lot of different African cultures is that Americans are lazy. They live off the government, they don't value education, they don't take anything seriously. And the reason they think this way is because in most African countries, you have to pay for school. So they feel that people who have the opportunity to get a free education should be much further in life. And while it seems simple and straightforward to them, they don't really understand the institutionalized racism and the systems that were put into place to make sure that people don't succeed. Because they didn't grow up in this system, they don't really understand how it works, which makes it a lot easier for them to judge. Now, on the other hand, I was in school when everyone was being called African booty scratchers. And I'd always be like, but I'm African too. And they'd be like, you're not a real African. These would be the same people that say, oh, Africans stink. Africans always have attitudes. Africans are so rude. To understand is that people in the United States of America grew up watching stereotypes of Africa that are predominantly false. And the ones that were even somewhat true were not recent. So many people think of Africa and think of jungles and savages because that's what the US media promoted. When in actuality, Africa is thriving. They have infrastructure and cities and technology the same as we do in the United States. But if that was promoted on TV, people would want to go back there as opposed to staying here. So like the original poster said, we're having these conflicts off of ideas that are not our own, off of false narratives that were built to keep us divided. But I think if we actually took the time to listen and learn, we see that there are a lot more similarities than there are differences.
In any case, as an African American, and thus a descendant of American slaves, not the traditional American immigrant story, I often find myself applauding African immigrants, particularly Nigerians, as I see them excel in academics and business, partly because their presence helps me to reconcile some of my own issues regarding America and its history vis-a-vis Black people.
Your highest educated group of people that enter America, that immigrate to America, are Nigerian. They have the highest level of education, and they have the greatest success rate in entrepreneurship. Africans, not Europeans, but Africans.
Even though, ultimately, these modern-day Africans are just another American immigrant story. Nevertheless, I love the way they tacitly yet devastatingly challenge a lot of annoying, extremist, conventional wisdom in America.
Look, to wake up and not be a minority, you don't know what that is. If you've never had to deal with that, congratulations, how beautiful is that? I'd recommend everybody go to Africa.
Beautiful place.
It's the birthplace of mankind.
That's right.
But for African Americans, I think it's even more special.
With the hard left, I can point to these people and say, if America is as oppressive as you say, how do you explain them? And to the racists on the alt-right, I can say with even more enthusiasm, if your race IQ studies are so irrefutable, why are you lagging so far behind a bunch of Black African immigrants? Don't forget to subscribe here at the Men at Work YouTube channel and leave your comment and view. Thank you.